Hi, dear After Ellen viewers, and welcome to the new episode of Dana Does It with Glee. I would have to apologize for the sparseness of my set at the moment. I usually have my gypsy poster behind me, but I am in the middle of moving, and thus everything's off my walls and in boxes. Actually, you can see one of the little boxes over here. Anyway, we are here to talk about a very serious episode of Glee, Shooting Star. Due to the nature of the episode, I'm actually going to structure my vlog a little differently today. I know I usually have a section where I talk about the music, but I really think that the plot line deserves the attention, surprisingly, in this episode. And so I'm not going to do a section about the music because the music really didn't, for me, add much to the actual episode. Overall, it was a very moving episode. I'm not gonna lie and say that I didn't shed a tear or two out of, fear and concern for these kids that I've grown to, really love over the last few years. And Glee tackles topical issues. That's always what Glee has done and been about. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's always very effective. Parts of the episode I think really nailed it home emotion-wise. I think Glee does emotion really well. But as a cohesive episode, as something that rings true of Glee, it didn't quite fit for me. It's kind of like if you've been eating something and it's like you're really blissed out on it. You're really enjoying whatever you're eating, and all of a sudden you bite down on something hard. And you really don't know what just happened, what it is. All you know is that it's uncomfortable and it's kind of painful. And you're not quite sure what the hell it's doing there. That's how I felt about this episode of Glee. Glee doesn't necessarily always do serious really well. Sometimes, but this just felt kind of plopped right in there. Now, the performances, on the other hand, are a completely different story. I think that some of the cast put in probably their best performances of the entire series in this episode. In particular, I thought Heather Morris did a pretty darn great job. I also think Cord Overstreet has really grown as an actor in the last few years, and this episode really gave him a big opportunity to shine. And his fear and frustration at not being able to get to Brittany was palpable, and I think it was important for us as the viewers to see that side of their relationship. Now, I know that's not exactly what you want to hear, and I will definitely address that a little bit later. Becky Tobin, who plays Kitty, really showed a very important side of herself in this episode, and maybe kind of makes you like Kitty a little bit more, or at least understand her a little bit more. Now, you know I'm not the biggest Artie fan, but I was pretty choked up at Kevin McHale's performance as well. So overall, Glee cast really knocked it out of the park as actors and cast members in this episode. Okay, so in this episode, the world is once again in jeopardy, according to Brittany. I was really surprised they decided to go with this again. I mean, we just had the world ending in Glee a few episodes ago, and it just felt so, weird and silly. Especially the fact that the adults, the people that are supposed to protect these children and help them through their fears, just kind of went along with it. Like, oh, okay, Brittany says there's a comet coming to kill us all, and so that must be true. Because apparently she's the president of the astronomy club. Oh, poor Ryder. I really do feel bad for Ryder in this situation. It must be just awful to be catfished. And this, this is an issue. This is a thing that's happening in our very anonymous, connected world. People are pretending to be people they're not, and we're seeing the other side of it, somebody who's just destroyed by it. And I have no idea who is catfishing. I have no idea. And I mean, I know people have all sorts of speculations, but I have a difficult time thinking that it's actually someone in the Glee Club. I actually don't really know if we're ever going to find out. The way they left this episode, I kind of felt like it was the end of that plot line. I don't know about you, but I got the impression that we weren't ever going to find out who Katie was. We also get this doozy thrown at us with this Coach Beast love confession to Will, which totally came out of left field and felt so completely unnecessary. That doesn't even seem like Coach Beast at all. I mean, Coach Beast is Will's friend, who supported him through this breakup with Emma, and why wouldn't she know that they were getting back together, and why would what were they thinking? It just... Sue Sylvester. This was probably the biggest, plot point other than the actual suspected shooting. And I'm still kind of in a daze about it. I figured eventually that Jane Lynch would be leaving the show. And I will state for the record right now, I do not even know if that is the situation, if this is just a temporary thing, or if Jane has left the show for real. I know that they haven't been utilizing Sue the way that they did in the first 2 seasons. And I think that sometimes characters run their course, and Jane Lynch has put in a tremendous spirit and heart and wit and all sorts of amazing things into Sue Sylvester. And my heart was just breaking for Becky. And her just complete fear of the future. I mean, who hasn't been there? To know that Sue sacrificed herself to protect one of her students, I can see that as a fitting exit for Sue Sylvester. I hope it isn't the last we see of her, but if it is, I think it fits. I want to talk a little bit about Brittana, because I get asked a lot about my feelings and thoughts on Brittana, and I see how frustrated the fans are and how passionately you feel about these characters and this coupling, this ship. Having your shipper heart broken, it sucks. It's painful and it's confusing, and I understand why there are so many frustrated Brittana fans out there. There has been very little opportunity for you to move on. Obviously, Brittany has this thing with Sam, and it appears that this thing is pretty solid now with them. And I know that that's also very difficult to deal with, in particular because Santana does not have the same sort of thing. Santana's world has been kind of wrapped up in Rachel and Kurt, and that's understandable. I mean, she just got to New York. I think that there's something great on the horizon for Santana. I think that the Glee powers that be realized what a tremendously popular character she is. And I really do think that given the opportunity and the right character, that Brittana fans would like to see Santana be happy. If it can't be with Brittany, at least be happy in her own skin and with somebody who treats her well and, maybe can give her as good as she gives. Would you like to see Santana meet somebody new in New York? Are you dealing a little bit better or accepting the relationship between Brittany and Sam based on this episode and their interaction? What would you like to see in the future for Brittany and Santana? Of course, as fans, we all have a lot of feels about this episode of Glee. Well, of every episode of Glee, but of this episode in particular. And I asked you on Twitter how you felt. And so I'm going to close with a couple of my favorite tweets of yours. As usual, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week on Dana Does It with Glee.